my name is Lee George, and I own a strategic branding and marketing agency called Freedom. And today I'm going to talk to you about trends in digital marketing. Today we've heard a lot about different new and emerging technology, from blockchain to virtual reality, augmented reality, and beyond. And so I don't want to focus on technology, because I think you do that at the expense of falling prey to what I call the shiny object syndrome, where you kind of get excited about something because it's new and different. And so I want to contextualize new digital technology within the frame of your audience, your customers. You're now marketing in a vastly different world than you used to be. And so what I first want to do is kind of look at what is this new world you're marketing in, what are the challenges and opportunities you have, and then look into 6 what I think are significant changes in consumer behavior and attitudes, and the 6 trends that I see emerging around how brands are responding to those. So this is the age of the customer. Brands do not call the shots anymore. It's customers who have the power to find out more about you, to get information on you, and make a decision before they even talk to you. They have more channels to use to do that, and they're really the ones that are in control of the relationship. And in this age of the customer, what you're really fighting for is attention. Because attention is the new currency. That's what we're all trying to get. So I'll sometimes refer to this moment as the golden age of marketing in some senses, because we have more channels than ever before to reach people, right? It's not just pre-internet, right? It was 3, really: print, radio, television. Now, there's a seemingly endless supply of channels, both online and offline, and new technologies are emerging every day that allow us to connect with consumers like never before. But as a result, our consumers are overwhelmed. One study I was reading said that we're exposed to between 5,000 and 10,000 brand messages a day. Just imagine that. Imagine that your communications are trying to fight within a stream of tens of thousands of messages. And I love this picture because it kind of represents how I feel when I open my inbox, right? It's like this barrage of information that's hitting me, and I just want to delete it all because I don't want to have to deal with it. So at the same time that consumers are overwhelmed, their attention span is shrinking, our attention span is shrinking, because one thing I always talk to marketers about is, on the one hand, you wear your marketing hat, but we all exist in the world where we're all consumers. We're all subjected to this as well. So it's easy for us to relate. There was one study that says we are switching screens at least 21 times an hour. I mean, I relate so much to this picture, right? Because even in this room throughout today, I've seen people with their tablets next to their phones, next to their laptops. This is something we do all the time. It's like we don't have enough devices. And Microsoft did a study that said our attention span is now down to 8 seconds. You have 8 seconds to grab someone's attention. So what's happening? The challenge in this environment is not to reach customers, right? Because we have infinite number of ways to reach customers. We know we're doing that well. The challenge really is not irritating them. It's avoiding bad experiences. And this is a Facebook post from my friend Nick Kaufman, who's not a marketer. He was just talking about how much brands irritate him. He says, "My newest pet peeve, websites that load ads at the top of the page, that push the text down just as you're trying to click the link, and you're like playing hopscotch trying to get to the content that you want." One of the sites I hate with a passion is Forbes, because I want to get to the article, and they take me to this holding cell, and I have to read an inspirational quote I didn't ask for, and then it just, right? It's ridiculous. I'm told that we're living in an age of personalization and customization, and I can know what, brands should know what I want before I even know, and yet we have this. What's going on? It's incredibly frustrating to people. And another important thing to consider in this age of the customer is, as companies, traditionally, we're very segmented, right? You've got your IT function, your marketing function, your product function, service, whatever it might be. Do consumers look at you that way? No, of course not. They think of any experience as an experience with you. It could be with a product, it could be with marketing, it could be with customer service, it could be with your website, it could be in brick and mortar. It doesn't matter. They don't distinguish between what's an actual product and service from what is marketing. It's all brand experiences to them. And so you have to take marketing seriously as though it's a product just like everything else that you do. And so, as a result of being so irritated by brands' efforts to reach us and delivering these horrible, irritating experiences that just interrupt what we're trying to do, one thing that people are doing is opting out, right? Who's unsubscribed from an email in the last month? Right? We do it all the time. In fact, now there's services that allow you to bulk unsubscribe. There's one called Unroll Me. Google is now testing a functionality. I think it's only available for Android users that signal to you, oh, you haven't opened any emails from this address in a certain amount of time. Would you like to unsubscribe? So AI is now helping us avoid brand messaging and brand communications. Another thing we do is we just avoid brands. How many people have a Netflix subscription? You're one of, or among 45% of the US population that has a subscription to Netflix. I mean, that's staggering, nearly half of the country. How many have a subscription to Hulu? Spotify, Pandora, right? We do this all the time. Back 10 years ago, we were happy to give Facebook tons of information about ourselves in exchange for connection. We're a little more savvy now. We don't like the way that brands are communicating to us, and we're literally paying to avoid brands. That's essentially what we're doing by subscribing to these services. Does anyone use an ad blocking service? All right, so that's something else that you can do now. You can set your experience up so you don't have ads at all because they're so irritating. So all of these different ways, consumers are making the choice not to interact with you. So it's not a killer app that you need. What's really the disruptor is your customer. And I think it's something that Gartner talked about earlier today in their talk, which is it's not technology that brings companies down, it's their unwillingness to put their customer at the center of their business. And this is a sort of infographic that I've seen floating around LinkedIn on and off over the year. You probably have seen it too. And it's the whole point that these new so-called tech-savvy companies or digital-first companies are disruptive. Well, it's not that the technology is disruptive, it's that they built a business model around a customer and then delivered an experience that people wanted. And so really, the biggest threat to your company is not being customer-centric. And this is a stat I wanted to share with you because I just find it amazing and sort of terrifying at the same time. Since 2000, over 50% of Fortune 500 companies have been acquired, merged, or declared bankruptcy. That is staggering to me. There's been no other time, in history that has been like this. And even, it's fascinating. So my dad was a corporate insurance broker. He's now retired. And I asked him, hey, what were some of the companies that you worked with? He worked with a lot of big brands who were Fortune 500 companies. The only one that's left, Chick-fil-A. Like, it's amazing. These were huge retailers, big companies. And so it's not only that, customers are the disruptor, and if you don't make your company centric, you're at a threat of being disrupted. It's happening at a pace that is unheard of, right? Since 2000, this is happening. So there's an incredible sense of urgency to pay attention to this. So, how do you compete? It's really about providing a feeling that customers can't get anywhere else. Because as we all know, people don't act purely for functional reasons. I didn't buy this dress because I needed something, I needed any dress. I chose it for very particular reasons, many of which were emotional. And so you're competing not just on, you're definitely not competing on price or offering because, there's lots of alternatives, as Gardner mentioned. People have lots of alternatives that aren't even your competitors that they can go to. And so really, you need to find a way to connect with them emotionally. And I use this example here of Ace Hotel. Has anyone heard of Ace Hotel or stayed there? Anyone? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Well, let me introduce you to them. They are a chain of boutique hotels. There's about a handful of them in the country. They started in New York, and I am obsessed with them. And this is the reason. They are able to create a highly personal experience through these little notes that they leave all throughout the hotel. So from the lobby to your room. So here are just a few examples. You pull out the ironing board and you look down and there's a message that says, "You sure would look better pressed." You're like, well, thank you. I appreciate that. The hangers have a message. "You would look great in this." The corner of the blanket, it says, "Thanks for sleeping with us." The trash cans even talk back. "Just trash, no treasure." It's humorous, it's personal, it's engaging, it connects with you. One of the most moving messages they have is on the stairway from the downstairs where kind of the gym and meeting spaces is to the lobby. There's a message that says something like, "Don't worry, it gets better." And it just kind of hits you in the gut. It's so unexpected and delightful. And I think there have been lots of new boutique hotels that have opened in New York since the Ace. But when I go to New York, the only place I stay is the Ace because I feel a connection to them. They make me feel good. It's the reason why the only digital product I will ever buy is Apple. Because to the extent that I have a computer that I bought in 2000 that doesn't even work anymore, and I just keep it around because it's a beautiful object, and it just makes me happy. I mean, that's crazy. It doesn't even work, technically, but it still performs a job, an emotional job for me. So what I want to do is take you through, as I mentioned, these, what I think are key changes in customer behavior, brands' responses to them, but then what I also include are what I'm calling thought starters. And because I think it's really easy to find innovative and creative examples that are inspiring, it's another thing to kind of take that back to the office and understand how to apply that to your day-to-day life. And so these thought starters get beyond kind of the glitz of the example and really look at the strategy that these brands are using. So you can think about, regardless of the budgets that some of these brands might have, how can you apply the strategy to your situation? So let's get started. So the first insight is, companies should be helping consumers with their passions and not the other way around, right? I think this has just been steadily building since social media emerged. Because in the age of the consumer doesn't care, your features and benefits. They don't care about your origin story. They want to know, what are you going to do for me? How can you help me? And again, it's not, in the past, I think, brands were trying to get their customers to fit into their world. Now brands need to fit into their consumers' world. And so a trend I see emerging around this idea is what I call value-driven brands. And I mean kind of value in two senses. One is brands that have a strong purpose that connects with issues that are meaningful to their customers, and so they provide a lot of value in that way. The other is value in terms of kind of cause, standing for principles. So the first example, it's probably the most obvious one I could probably ever pick. So I'm sure you all know this ad campaign, Colin Kaepernick for Nike. It was hugely successful. I think when it launched, people thought, this is really risky. They're really kind of stepping on a cliff here. But in terms of revenue, it's really paid off. But what's interesting about this, I think this campaign got a lot of attention. I think because of the timing of it, because of the political climate. But brands have been doing this for a while. I think about Dove's Real Beauty campaign, right? Where they saw, gee, beauty brands are making women feel horrible about themselves. That's wrong. We feel that that's wrong. We're going to take a stand, and we're going to create messaging and products that make women feel beautiful no matter who they are, what they look like, what their size is. And I mean, it was, when it first launched, it was incredibly new and different and unlike anything else. But then there have also been other brands. I think Patagonia is one of the best examples that since the early 70s when it started, its brand was always based on principles and values and really aligned well with the customers it was serving. So here's another example. I thought this was extremely clever. So this is a Finnish renewable energy company. And they were frustrated by the fact that it was really difficult to find sustainable places to stay when they were traveling. And obviously their customers are very interested in sustainability. And so they created this platform that they call Zero B2B. And so what they've done is they've curated all of the sustainable properties on Airbnb because currently there's no filter to find sustainable properties on that platform. And they said as soon as Airbnb creates a filter for sustainable properties, they will take this platform down. So it's a great way to plug into the interests of their customers, raise awareness around something that's meaningful to them, and to help their customers further their interest in a cause that they believe in. The other thing that I think is that this sort of sparked a thought for me is around this idea of personalization. I think people have become so obsessed with big data and personalization and how can we deliver on it when there are very kind of low-tech ways to do that, and I think one of them is filtering, right? So the idea is that you have lots of information, but you have filters that allow people to get to the information that's most interesting to them at that moment. Because the information we need can change. A great example of this is, right, when you're going shopping on a retail site. Well, one day I might need a shirt, another day I might need shoes. And with filters, I can easily find exactly what I want. I think some of the best sites like Sephora really allow you to get down to, really very specific areas. But I think filtering is something that I think is a huge opportunity, and a lot of brands aren't taking advantage of it. And then finally, the last example is an association called BIO. It stands for Biotechnology Innovation Organization. And they represent biotechnology companies around the world. They're a member-based association. And they're actually a client of mine. And we were working on messaging together. And one of their challenges was they stand for innovation because their members are solving some of the biggest challenges that we face today. Curing disease, developing renewable sources of food, renewable sources of fuel, and other kind of renewable materials. And they wanted messaging that sort of reflected that that the organization was championing for them. And so they created messaging that had the members at the heart of it. So their messaging starts with kind of a statement around their understanding of what's at stake for these companies, because they're solving these tremendous problems, but at the same time, they're faced with all of these barriers to innovation, whether it's tax law, regulation, other legislation, lack of investment. And Bio is saying to them, we see what you're up against, and we know you don't have time to kind of fight those barriers and work on these incredible challenges, so we're going to help you, and here's how. Here's all the things that we do to help remove those barriers so that you can achieve the impact that you're seeking. And so it was just a way to create a very member-centric message that really showed their membership that the organization is really focused on their issues and kind of fighting their fights. So the thought starters here would be, how does your purpose intersect with your customer's passion? And the way I describe branding is, it's not about you, or it shouldn't be all about you. It's as much about your customers as it is about you. And branding should really happen at the intersection of your purpose and your customer's passion. That's the sweet spot of branding. So you have to figure out how that intersection happens in your case. And then what impact do you have on the challenges that matter most to your customers? Again, it's not trying to get customers to fit into your world, it's how do you fit into their world and what impact do you make for them? So the next insight is, actually the next two center around the difference between people's expectation of interactions with brands online versus offline. So online, consumers expect brands to be where they are, right? It's the age of the customer. I don't care where your brick and mortar location is. I don't care where your website is. You need to be where I am, wherever I am. So the trend here is, I'll call on-demand brands. And these are brands who have gotten very creative with, again, figuring out ways to fit into the world of their customer and not trying to force the customer into their world. So the first example is a makeup company called NYX, and it's owned by L'Oreal. And obviously, beauty and wellness in and of itself is a very huge trend right now. And so this is an app that does two things. So part of it is kind of on-demand live consultation from a beauty expert so that you can get that kind of personalized attention via the app. But then layered onto that is an augmented reality experience that allows you to virtually try on makeup. So the red lipstick you see on both of the women is the augmented reality. So, you know, makeup, right, that's something you can't, you like physically need to have the makeup to try it in the past. So this is a way that allows you to kind of both get a personal experience and get a sense of what the makeup will be like. This, again, did not come out of nowhere, right? How many people are familiar with Warby Parker? Right? So the low-tech version of this is, we'll send you 3 pairs or 5 pairs of glasses to try it at home, put them on, take a picture of yourself, post it on social media, and we'll tell you, you know, we'll give you recommendations about what to wear. They are, in fact, developed now an augmented reality to kind of take that experience to the next level. So this is something I think more and more retailers specifically are thinking of. I know earlier today we heard a pitch about how to use it in your industry as well. This is one of my favorite examples. I just think this is so smart. So, you know, everybody wants millennials' attention, right? They're the big, hot, sexy thing. As a Gen X person, it makes me kind of sad. I feel like we've kind of been left behind. But I do have Gen Z children, so I can tell that attention is already being geared towards them. So this is the New York Public Library. I cannot think of a more traditional, more conventional brand. And so the challenge was they want to get more people reading, right? They could have done a campaign to get more people to come to the library, more people to check out books, but they didn't do that. Instead, they said to themselves, where is our audience? Where are they consuming media? How can we translate our experience into one that they're already familiar with and enjoy? And so they created these Insta novels. And they're starting with 3, Alice in Wonderland, The Yellow Wallpaper, and Metamorphosis, all for Instagram. So there'll be Instagram stories as well as posts. There'll be some animation, and they'll be sort of serially released. So you read it a little bit at a time. And I just thought that this was so innovative for them because they really understood it's not about trying to kind of change the behavior of someone and get them to do what you want them to do. It's about understanding what the behavior is and how you can adapt what you do to that behavior. So I just think this is like so wonderful. So the last example is an e-commerce company called Threads. Has anyone heard of them? So what's really amazing about them is they do not have a website. Can you imagine e-commerce with no website? So what they do is they sell, and this is a luxury retailer too. Their average sale is around $3,000, which is kind of blows my mind, but So they sell on Instagram, and then they use messaging apps for kind of customer service and consultation. And so that's how their entire business is done. And clearly it's working because of the high dollar value of each sale. So again, it's rethinking. Instead of trying to get someone, like creating a website and trying to get someone to come to it, they are thinking about where are their customers, and how can they integrate with behavior that's already native to their customers. That's the saying, if you build it, they will come. We just need to toss that out the window and invert it, go to where they are. So the thought starters here is, I think in financial services, because of the regulation, it's easy to put on a black hat and say, oh, this won't work for us. But what if? Just imagine, how could you deliver your service in an unexpected platform via a song or SMS? Brainstorm blue sky opportunities for the services and products that you offer. And then explore, really get to understand your audiences, your consumers. Where are they spending their time? Again, how could you fit into their world? Instead of trying to drag them into yours, how could you fit into their world? Not in an interruptive way, I think, that a lot of brands try to do, but really, how could you seamlessly fit into places where they're already spending their time? So we just talked about, online. It's about going to where your consumers are. It's obviously about convenience. In real life, though, customers seek experiences they can't get anywhere else. PSFK, which is a futurist and trends research company, calls offline or in real life a playground, not a point of sale. And Trend Watching, which is another similar company, says, online, you should be saving attention. Offline, you should be aggressively seizing it. Because again, attention is currency. And the trend that I'm identifying here is brand besties. So I think, there have been a lot of pop-ups. It's become a big trend. But what I'm seeing that I find really interesting is not just a brand doing a kind of spectacle-like in real life experience, but brands who are partnering together to create experiences that people can't find anywhere else. These may be older established brands that are looking to appear more hip by partnering with younger brands, and younger brands who want to partner with older brands because it gives them a certain level of credibility. It could be two younger brands. And the first example I want to give is, I'm from DC, so I want to give a local example. Anyone from DC? Okay, good, then, oh wait, one person. So this is a place called Maquetto, and it opened about 4 years ago. And the reason I call it a place is, when it opened, no one knew what to call it, because it was kind of a combination of three things. It had a retail store in front, it included a restaurant, and it included a cafe. So it was this bizarre hybrid experience that in DC we had never seen before, and it was just really amazing. So what you're looking at as you walk in is the retail component. And this was actually the brainchild of two guys. One is Eric Bruner Yang, who's a Michelin-nominated chef, and then a local designer whose line is called Durkle. It's a line of streetwear. And so the front of the building is the retail part. Past that, there's some restaurant seating and a bar. Past that, through the windows in the back, is a courtyard where you can sit. Past that is a separate building with the kitchen, and there's seating in the kitchen. And then upstairs is the cafe. So it's just this really incredible, interesting mix of experiences that was just kind of an interesting way to combine forces for two young kind of entrepreneurs who were looking to grow their businesses. So this next example combines two brands that I think are really doing some interesting things in retail, Nordstrom and Casper. So Nordstrom, as you've probably heard, has been testing these kind of no retail spaces where it literally is kind of, as PSK described them, kind of playgrounds where you can kind of go, experience, and you're not really there to buy. In this case, these are their more traditional retail spaces, but they've created what they've called at Nordstrom pop-ups, where they feature other brands. So here, in this example, they're partnering with Casper, which is an online mattress company. Casper itself has done some amazing pop-ups. They've gone on tours around the country. I know when they launched, they did a pop-up in DC. This was like around 3 or 4 years ago, that had like beds set up and movies with projected onto the wall with clouds, and it was very Instagrammable, right? That's what everybody's doing, is going to these things so you could post pictures. So this was a really interesting, I think, partnership where Casper could leverage the clout that Nordstrom had, and Nordstrom could kind of leverage the hipness that Casper had. The whole kind of pop-up experience here also had wellness products and sleepwear products, so it became this kind of whole environment. And then next is CVS. So the chain pharmacy space, I'm really fascinated by, because kind of like the grocery space, there's a lot of experimentation going, there's a lot of consolidation, there's a lot of competition. This is definitely a space that Amazon has its eye on, so it makes a lot of people nervous. So CVS decided to do a partnership with Glam Squad, which is a on-demand kind of makeup and hair service. So like if you're going out, you can call them and they'll come over and glam you up. So they're testing out this concept called beauty in real life. So it's kind of taking the notion of like the beauty section in a pharmacy and taking it to the nth degree. So it's going to have actual beauty squad, Glam Squad makeup artists to kind of give you makeovers. You can test makeup in a way that you can't currently do in a drugstore. There's special sections with sample sizes that you can take. They're going to have a trending wall that kind of shows you the products that are hot right now. So it's really enhancing the experience of a place that I think people almost take for granted, right? You kind of pop into your, drugstore by where you work or where you live, and you're kind of buying these products, but this is something that really makes it an experience. So the last example here I want to give is one, not because I think it's a good example, but because I think it's a bad example. So, and I can do this because I'm a Capital One customer. So I'm sure you've all heard of the Capital One cafes, right? So I just think that this is kind of the opposite end of what the New York Public Library was doing. So Capital One, right, as you all know, a really big concern is, well, millennials aren't coming into banks anymore, right? They're using online banks. And so Capital One wanted to figure out a way to get more millennial business. And so instead of thinking about millennial behavior, how banking fit into the everyday life of a millennial, or even how millennials thought about money, instead, they went the opposite direction and sort of said, well, we have these, retail spaces, essentially. How can we get them to come to them? Oh, well, millennials like co-working and they like coffee shops. Let's just give them that, and we'll partner with Pete's Coffee, and then we'll also have banking and different events. And thus you get the Capital One Cafe. I actually had a friend of mine, I was talking to him about this, and he said that a friend of his went into one who actually needed to do a transaction, and he couldn't find anyone to help him because everyone was doing like vision boards and other things. So I think, there has to be a strategy behind this. It's not about kind of trying to reimagine or hippify yourself or try to trick people to come to you. And so I thought it would be valuable to kind of look at this example as one that I don't think works very well or is very strategic. So the thought starters here would be sidestep the obvious and think about what potential partner brands align with your purpose. So not necessarily the obvious ones, but maybe something that would be more, a little less obvious. And then what brand assets do you have that could offer the most potential for collaboration? So the next insight is that as consumers, we're conflicted. We love personalization, but we don't trust brands' use of our data, right? There was a talk earlier today about data breaches, and it's something I feel like every day you're finding out about a new data breach. And it's become a huge concern. It's in the news all the time. It's something that people are trust in brands, I think, is actually at an all-time low. So how are brands dealing with this, both in terms of dealing with data, but then also the issue of trust? And the trend here is I'm calling brand transparency, and that's both transparency around how data is used and the data that companies collect about you, but also transparency about themselves and their own business processes. So, of course, the first example I have is Apple, who I'm sure you've all heard about the FaceTime bug that happened lately. So this might not be the best example. But what I really love about this is that probably, more the mobile devices have more data about us than practically anywhere else. And I think this is a great way to allow consumers to be more mindful about what they're doing, how they're spending their time. Because it's one thing to be on the phone all day long. It's another to see a report of how you're spending your time, how long I've been on Twitter, how long my daughter, who likes to play Fortnite on my iPhone, has been playing Fortnite. So it really makes what had been a very opaque experience very transparent. This is an example that I think is really creative. So this is a nonprofit, and they created what they call a she board, which uses technology to reveal if you're using gendered language and gives you a chance to use non-gendered language, so that you're just much more aware about how you're talking to girls. And again, it's helping you understand your communication better. And then this last example I think is really fascinating. So this is Super U, which is a grocery store in France. And they are using Snapchat to show their customers how fresh their food is. So what they're doing is they're taking Snapchat spectacles and they're recording from the time a fish is caught all the way through to when the fish appears in the store. And they're creating Snapchat stories about that, which they're calling fresh stories. And so the idea is Snapchat stories only last 24 hours. So if you see fish in the grocery store that have a little icon, the Snapchat icon, you can see the movie and know that that fish is fresh because the story exists about it. So I think this is a really amazing way of using technology to really make your business more transparent to your customers. So the thought starters here are, what data can you share to provide insight that your customers could benefit from? And then also, what parts of your business would your customers want to understand better? The next insight is consumers expect more for our brand passion. And this is really kind of around loyalty programs and the idea that in the past, loyalty has been very transactional, right? If I shop with you or do business with you, I'll get points, but then everybody else gives me points. So the more, I'm very fickle, right? I'll just go to wherever the points are. There's no emotional connection. So in this age of the customer, consumers want more. We want more than points. And this trend I'm calling brand benefits, brands that really go kind of beyond a transactional arrangement to really deliver value and amazing experiences in exchange for loyalty. So the first one is an airline, Singapore Airlines, and instead of just having a mileage program, they've actually created what they call KrisFlyer Miles, which is a digital wallet. So instead of having to kind of exchange the points, you can actually pay directly from this mobile app. So it makes using your points very easy. The next example is Lululemon. And what they're doing, this is being tested in Canada right now, but their loyalty program is kind of taking a page from Amazon Prime. So what they'll do is, for a monthly fee, you'll get a free pair of pants or shorts, you'll get access to curated special exercise classes, and you'll get free expedited shipping. So it's that idea that, you know, I want to have a certain kind of experience with you, or a more enhanced experience than kind of normal customers, and I'm willing to pay for it. And so Lululemon is exploring that through a subscription program. This last one is something that I've sort of started noticing, and it really fascinated me. Who here watches the sitcom Schitt's Creek? And that's S-C-H-I-T-T-S. I didn't want you to think I was saying that word. So I am obsessed with this show. It's a Canadian show. I first discovered it on Netflix. It's actually aired on this network called Pop, which I had never even heard of before. Anyway, it sort of started out small, and it's now has this huge following. It's a really funny show. If you have Netflix, you should check it out. It's in its 5th season, I think. So, you know, most movies and TV shows will do press junkets, right? Where the cast tours and talks to different reporters. Well, Schitt's Creek is going on tour. So they announced this tour where you could buy tickets and go see them. I will, in fact, be seeing this later this month in Washington, D.C. And I thought, this is fascinating. They know that their fans are not just, I mean, like, are super crazy about them. And so I think this started as like a one-time thing in California, and then they decided to do this kind of nationwide tour. And what you're seeing here is that they actually, because of course I looked into this as someone who bought a ticket, they do these contests and games with the audience. So it's very interactive. And like any sort of concert, you can get you know, the primo access ticket for what I think is too expensive a cost. But I just thought this was a really creative way. It's kind of like treating a TV show like a rock band and giving their fans access in a way that you just can't get anywhere else. So I just thought this was a really interesting way to both kind of feed the passion of fans, increase engagement, and kind of generate more buzz. So it just operates on so many levels. So the thought starters here are kind of reimagine loyalty by thinking beyond transactions. What experiences could you use to reward brand passion? I think, you know, I'm sure you're all familiar with the research that says that people are more interested now in buying experiences than they are in buying things. And so what kinds of experiences can you give people as a reward for brand loyalty? And then what unexpected opportunities could you use to connect with customers? What, you know, could you go on tour? What are some of the things that you could do to engage with them that might not be kind of expected? So this is the last insight. And I think it's one of the most significant ones. Though technology promises to connect us like never before, we are more isolated than ever. And there have actually been a lot of studies done showing that social isolation has now, I think Cigna did a study, showing that social isolation is as significant a problem as obesity and diabetes. I mean, that blew my mind. I had no idea. And so it sparked a trend that I'm calling brand communities. So brands that are now helping people connect in unexpected ways. So the first example is KLM, the airline, and they did a campaign over Christmas where they kind of set up an experience in airports by their terminals with 2 chairs. The chairs used API technology to translate in real time what people sitting in the chairs were saying so that people speaking different languages could communicate. Which just, I mean, you know, at Christmas time, holidays, you're traveling, like you get all the warm and fuzzies with this one. So again, helping people connect. This is a brand called Outdoor Voices. Is anyone familiar with them? So whereas Nike is all about competition and performance, Outdoor Voices is really more about like recreation. So it's like walking the dog or playing Frisbee with your friends or doing yoga with your friends. So it's really more about kind of less competition, more recreation. So this is a picture of one of their retail spaces, and you can see it's definitely more playground than point of sale. It's very bright, it's very colorful. They have like different activities that you can do inside. And one of the things they've started doing is offering clubs where you can join a club and it's based on, you know, different activities. So there's like the yoga club or the running club. There's, again, it's a catalyst for bringing together people with shared interests. So you can kind of meet one another in person. Rafa, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, it's a cycling company, and they do something similar. So even though the bikes are really high end, they'll offer clubs at all ability levels. So if you're a professional, you can join in, or if you are an amateur just starting. So a lot of athletic brands, sports brands are doing this. Even Makeda, the example I mentioned to you in DC, because their brand is so community focused, they also hosted yoga classes and Sunday morning runs from their retail location. This is another DC example, because I think oftentimes these small emerging local companies are kind of the most creative. And this is called Steadfast Supply, and it started as a pop-up, and now it's in a semi-permanent place. And it is a curated retail environment. So it curates both local makers and independent makers from around the country so that when you go in, it's never the same, right? The inventory changes through, so it kind of becomes this destination. But then more than that, they offer classes. I think what's interesting is as people are more interested in experience, as learning has become easier with this explosion of online learning opportunities, brands are now also offering workshops as a more kind of informal learning environment that really allows for connection. So unlike, say, online learning where it's kind of you and the computer, here it's an in-person workshop where you might be doing, they do a good job of kind of balancing the personal and the professional. So they'll have workshops or classes for like moms and their toddlers. They'll have flower arranging workshops. They'll have accounting for entrepreneur workshops. And every month they come out with a new schedule. So, and they have space there to host them. And so it's a great way to bring people, again, around shared interests. Take that a step further, and you have the Lemon Bowl Collective, which is another DC company. So this is a group, it's a collective of local artists and artisans. And they have a studio space which they share, which is why they're a collective. But really, how most people know them are through the classes that they offer. So they have a calendar of events every month, and it's mostly centered toward, or kind of, I think, more appealing to women. But it's a full range of kind of fun, crafty kind of things, all the way up to more kind of serious, emotionally focused things to more kind of professional skills. So it's a whole range. And again, the classes are always changing, which kind of creates a sense of FOMO, fear of missing out, and an eagerness to see kind of what's the next class, or if a class is sold out, how can I get into the next one? And again, it's all around creating community, bringing people together who are interested in learning about the same thing or doing the same sort of activity. And then finally, you have community as business model. How many people have heard of The Wing? Anyone? So this is a, I guess it's sort of described as a social club, really. It's almost like an antidote to a co-working space. So it's a space created for women. There's a membership you have to apply. You can certainly use it to work in. I'm, in fact, a member. But they also have all kinds of events. And then they have the online database of members that helps you connect with them. And so really, their whole model is around community and connection and facilitating connection both digitally online through a portal that they have, but then offline through events and actual spaces. So the thought starters here are, what can you do to help connect the community you serve? And obviously, that's something that's at the heart of each of your businesses. And then what could you do at brick and mortar locations or online to support those communities? So to sum up, before your next marketing campaign, you should think about how well do you know your audience really? And I think big data is important, but I think thick data is essential. And by thick data, I mean the motivations, the fears, the challenges, the goals of the people that you serve. And then does your brand put your customer at the center of your story? What kinds of experiences do you offer? How is your online experience different from your offline experience? How are you building trust while delivering on service? What are you doing to stoke your customers' passions? And then what are you also doing to build community? So thank you.